This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, find the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm Mac Pritchard, founder and publisher of Mac's List. To get your dream job, you need clear goals, great skills, and a good network. You also have to know how to look for work. One of the best ways to get good at job hunting is to talk to people who do it well. That's why once a month on our show, I interview a Mac's List reader who found a job they love. Our guest shares how they did it and offers their best job search tips. Our guest today is Leslie Yeargers, career intake counselor with Vicki Lynn and Associates. It's a career transition and job search service company here in Portland, Oregon. Many of us will leave the workplace for a time during our careers. We may want to start a family, or perhaps we want to go to graduate school, or take some other kind of break. Whatever the reason, restarting a career after a break can be tricky. Leslie recently returned to the job market after spending 15 years at home raising her children. She needed to show employers how volunteer work during those years gave her valuable experience and skills. Her goal when she started her search was to find a well-paying and meaningful part-time position. In an article you can find on the Mac's List website, Leslie says she used a custom cover letter and resume for every position for which she applied. This letter highlights how community involvement improved her strengths and capabilities. And Leslie offers this simple advice for every job seeker. Do your research and tailor your application materials for every job. Leslie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. And now, as I mentioned, you're an intake counselor at Vicki Lynn and Associates, the company here in Portland. Leslie, why do you love your job?
Well, I really love my job because I like interacting with the people that I talk to. I've talked to some really interesting folks. Just when they call and ask about our services, they have some pretty fascinating stories, and it's kind of like a puzzle for me. I like matching them to just the right associate over there at Vicki Lynn and Associates. We have 5 career service professionals now, and each one has a slightly different niche and background and area of expertise, and so listening to their stories, I can match them to the right person to get started.
I've had the good fortune to meet some of your teammates, Vicki and Janet and Kristen.
Yeah.
You've got some cool people over there who know what they're doing.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about you and your job search. What made the biggest difference in your success?
I think what made the biggest difference was actually my cover letter, of
Really?
all things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Okay, so when I found the job posting, it met all my qualifications or criteria for a part-time job with reasonable pay. I only had 2 at the time. And, to get
Those
back
are
into the
pretty
job
good
market.
criteria, though, yeah.
Yeah. And I found it on Mac's List, and so I immediately went on the internet and looked up Vicki Lynn, and found her website. And I spent about an hour to 2 hours just really reading it and researching it and taking note of the items on her website that struck me as particularly interesting and meaningful for me. And when I wrote my cover letter, I included those things and talked about how I felt I would be a good fit for her business, highlighting that she loves to work with women over 50 and people who had been stay-at-home parents. That's what spoke to me, and so I made sure I mentioned that. And the feedback that she gave me is out of the number of resumes they received, there were 2 things that I had done right on my cover letter. That was what got my foot in the door. And one was I bothered to find out who she was. I mean, it was pretty obvious because it was in the job listing, but I addressed it to Ms. Lind. And I included information about the website. And so that told her that I'd done my research.
Yeah. So you showed her that. You just didn't say what that you had done it, you actually included examples in your cover letter.
Yes.
Did you tailor your resume too?
Well, my resume is another story.
Okay, tell us about that.
Kind of a funny one, actually, and it's not something I would recommend that anybody do.
Okay.
So this is what not to do. Vicky's actually taught me, and Tiffany, our resume writer, has taught me a great deal about writing a quality resume. And so when I applied, I made the mistake of just putting together a strictly skills-based resume with a very abbreviated, the work history was nothing but one lines of title, job, and dates. And that was because I'd been out of the workforce for so long, and all of my experience, or most of my experience that was relevant, had been through volunteering. And so I did the strictly skills-based resume with, 15 bullet points of skills under different categories. So I had maybe 3 or 4 categories and a ton of bullet points, very little explanatory text, no professional profile or anything like that. And, that resume went into a lot of voids when I was applying for jobs, and I now know why.
And why was that, Leslie?
Well, because...
Why did it end up in the black hole?
Because I did just the strictly skills-based resume, and what I've learned by going to various networking events for job searchers, and also talking with Vicki and talking with Tiffany, is that those don't really work too well. Most of the HR people that I've encountered at these networking events have said, if you've had a break in your work history, in your career, the best thing to do is do a hybrid kind of resume where you can have a relevant skills section and you can categorize your skills, but mix in a little bit of explanatory text with maybe no more than 6, at the very most 7 bullets of highlights for each section. Even that's kind of pushing it, I think. And just try to organize it a little better. And then also in the work history section, put in some explanation about what you did. Don't just put one line of, I was a technical writer at Microsoft from 1987 to 1995 or whatever, even though that's old and outdated anyway. But that's kind of what I did. And they were saying, no, we kind of want to know what you did at those jobs.
Okay.
And
so take the best of both worlds, both the skills resume format and what's called the chronological format.
Exactly. Right. And I'm wishing I had added a volunteer section to that. In addition to work experience, I could have treated volunteer work as if it were actual paid work on my resume and just, given it the title of volunteer experience. And then treat it like I would any other job description.
So a lot of our listeners, Leslie, are like you. They've taken a break from the workforce and they want to get back. They might be mid-career, perhaps in their 40s or 50s. What challenges did you face when you were in that situation, and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest challenge was overcoming my fear that I wasn't going to find a job and doing things to kind of boost my confidence. It's kind of my story is kind of funny when I went back into the job market. Is I have a master's in counseling degree that I thought I would dust off and try to become licensed, because I never jumped through those hoops after I got my master's in my early 30s. And so I went back to school and figured that that's what I needed to do. I researched what I needed to do to go into the career that I thought that I wanted to go back into. So I did that, went back to school, got the credits I needed, and then I needed to find the externship to build hours. And of course, I was looking for something that would pay reasonably well. And I was also applying to, kind of contradictory to that goal, I was applying to any jobs that looked like they would be applicable, even the $11 an hour residential counselor jobs that I think we're just way underpaid for the kind of work a person
just
does.
to meet your salary requirements.
Well, yeah. And also, given the amount of effort I would be putting into those jobs and having a family of my own still to take care of, that would have been a lot for $11 an hour. So I applied to a couple full-time positions that were salaried as well and got a couple interviews. And then ended up researching some of those jobs on Glassdoor and realizing, well, maybe I don't want these. I mean, there was one job that I got that was a 24/7 on-call, 55-hour-a-week position.
Sounds very demanding.
And that I got a second phone call from the headquarters in Tennessee for that job, and I had told her, well, I'm not interested anymore. Yeah. So. Well, and then also it's just hard to find externships in a marriage and family counseling.
So it was
field.
challenging to find the externship, and when you did find positions, they didn't pay particularly well. So what happened next?
Right. So then I thought, well, maybe what I need to do is beef up my game.
Okay.
So I started doing a little more networking and speaking to my old professors. And here at Portland State, I had a couple of professors, and then even I put together my references ahead of time from professors who I had worked with through online school at Capella University. And I just started networking a little bit. They would give me names of people to contact that they knew of or places to go to and ask for informational interviews. So I did some of that. And while I was in the throes of this, and I only gave myself a couple months, like 2 to 3 months. And for this, I think it takes at least 6 months to really be successful. But while I was in the throes of this whole process, a friend of mine said, hey, they're hiring a part-time receptionist over at RE/MAX where I work. Are you interested? And I said, you know what? I just want a job. At this point, I've been out of the job market for 15 years. I just want a job.
So did you get that position?
I did get that position.
How did it go?
It went pretty well. I enjoyed it. I was just Mondays and Tuesdays and Sunday mornings. I went in and answered phones and did office work as needed and supported the realtors in there if they had some projects that needed doing, like mailings or I don't know, just whatever they needed. And I took minutes for meetings, and I did a lot of just basic office work. And I liked the people a lot. It was a good environment. But I'd never felt like my skills were fully utilized.
Did the job help you sort of break back into the working world then?
It did help me break back.
To it?
That was a huge benefit. And I recommend that for anyone trying to break back or get back into the working world.
So maybe a starter job just to get your feet wet.
Yeah. And I developed some good office skills, which I hadn't had before. And I learned a lot about real estate. Good. And I went ahead and got my real estate license, thinking that maybe I would become an assistant. And so, I knew I didn't really want to sell real estate, but so I left RE/MAX because I got asked by a real estate team over at Living Room if I wanted to become, an assistant for them. And we tried that for 3 months, and it didn't work out very well. It was sort of a mutual thing where it wasn't.
So you were experimenting.
I was experimenting. And it didn't work out. I had some things going on in my family, and he needed someone who had a lot more experience in real estate than I did, and he also needed someone whose technology was on the same par as his. He was a Mac user. I was a Windows user. There were, there were some differences there. That
Mac PC.
Yeah, exactly.
But then, did that bring you to Vicki Lynn? Did you?
Well, okay. So then I left that job, and I found myself unemployed.
Okay.
And again, found myself going, oh no, now what? Here I am again, where I was 2.5 years ago. I'm back in this spot. Oh, what am I going to do? So I thought, okay, I'm going to do some strategic volunteering because the counseling is still interesting to me.
What kind of volunteering opportunities did you look for?
So I became a CASA, and I went and I did the CASA training. Okay. And I got
And
a
these
case.
are court-appointed special advocates, aren't they?
Yes, for
These are
children
people
who are in the foster care system
Okay,
or
good.
who are wards of DHS. They may not necessarily be in
Department
foster
of Human
care.
Services.
Yes,
Yeah, good.
yes. So I did that, and I'm still doing that.
All right,
But-
and you also worked as a volunteer at the Rock and Roll Camp for Girls, I think.
Well,
didn't
that
you?
was years ago.
Okay.
When I was going back into my job,
that's when
that
you were
was
between.
yeah, that was when my kids
were.
were still in school and I was still at home. And I've haven't been involved with that organization for a while, but have thought about getting my feet wet with them again. But time just is a factor.
Yeah. So, you did the volunteer work. You had these first experiences back in the workplace, and then where did your journey take you?
Well, as I was doing the CASA training, I was also still looking for jobs, and then I found Vicky's posting on MacList.
And then you sat down and wrote that cover letter.
I sat down and I wrote that cover letter and submitted my resume, and I was one out of 2 or 3 people that she invited in for an interview. So I went in for my interview, and that went so-so. Vicki and I laugh about it today because she asked me the question of if she uses a lot of technology, and she's got a good setup going, but uses tools that I wasn't familiar with. And she said, well, when you're not familiar with technology or you have a technological problem you have to solve, what do you do? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I have resources at my disposal to learn about that. I would, my husband is one of them, so I might ask him. And she said that was completely the wrong answer.
But she invited you back.
Well, she didn't, though. That's what's so funny is she didn't. I didn't get the job initially.
Okay.
She gave it to someone else, and
So what happened next, Leslie? Because you're working over there now.
I know.
Yeah.
That person lasted, I think, a week, and then didn't want to come back.
Okay.
And I think it was one of those situations where, a perfect storm occurred. That her Comcast went out. There was, I don't know what all the issues were, but I do know her Comcast went out. And that was kind of stressful on that day. And so her current assistant at the time, who was leaving and she was replacing, was trying to train this poor person, and Comcast goes down and this other thing happens and something else happens and it's a big kerfluffle there. And she just decided she didn't want to stay. So they call me back and they say, will you come in for a working interview at Vicky's house? So I said, sure. I still don't have a job. Why not? So I went back in and had a working interview, and they offered me the job. So I took it.
And you've been there for a while.
And I've been
now.
there for 2 years. It'll be 2 years in April.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And my role has expanded, and Vicky's such a fantastic mentor and is really about growing people. Yeah. And so she's trained me on job search coaching and resume coaching and interview coaching, and I do that now too.
Oh, terrific.
As well as I'm her intake counselor and her operations coordinator, so I still do her technical stuff, and we work on projects together, newsletters and reviewing resumes and cover letters together, and we do a lot of this and that.
What a wonderful job. Well,
yeah, it's a great job.
I love about your story is that you took risks, you tried different things when you got back into the workplace, and when things didn't work out, you didn't let it stop you. You tried something else.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I also like the fact that you were volunteering in the community that had to help grow your network, but also give you energy and purpose while you continued your search.
Yes.
And kudos to you, Leslie, for going back when you got that second call and not being, not thinking, oh, well, they had their chance. It's time for me to move on.
Oh, no. No, I kind of believe that was meant to happen in a way because I think Vicki and I are a good team.
Good.
And I think it's worked out really well for both of us.
It certainly sounds that way. Well, Leslie, thanks for sharing your story.
Sure.
And I know people can learn more about you and your work and your job search journey by visiting our website. The URL is maxlist.org/stories. And Please check out the website for dozens of other job search success stories. Every Friday, we add a new interview to the website with a Max List reader who's found their dream job, like Leslie. And in the meantime, thank you, our listeners, for downloading today's bonus episode of Find Your Dream Job.